Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this The Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And naturally, we're in the final week of the campaign and there's not an awful lot more I can say that hasn't already been said. Hence I'm going to focus on things that, well, I suppose the alternative media was made for, and that is to actually get things fact-checked and critique mainstream or legacy media for doing such a poor job of what they should be actually doing, which is giving fair and balanced questions to politicians who aren't necessarily fair and balanced. Well, I mean, you wouldn't expect them to be, they're political actors. Anyway, Nigel Farage posted over the weekend that he was invited to appear on Laura Kusenberg, who I actually think is one of the BBC's only fair and decent journalists, probably why leftists absolutely hate her, but he's refusing until the BBC apologised for their dishonest question time audience. The state broadcaster has behaved like a political actor through this election, and Reform will be campaigning vigorously to abolish the licence fee. And naturally, you had a bunch of leftists saying, oh, Nigel Farage doesn't like being challenged. Oh, he only wants to be surrounded by sycophants, despite the fact that he is happy to do plenty of other media interviews. But he is clearly using this question time performance to beat the BBC over the head with a big stick and saying, I'm refusing to play your game. That's effectively all he's saying. But given I was away over the weekend, I didn't quite get to see the question time special with Nigel Farage, and so I am interested to hear what questions are asked. So luckily Connor Tomlinson over at the Lotus Eaters has managed to do a supercut of the questions, and we will see how rigorously Nigel Farage was actually roasted on question time. I do not have high hopes for this.
With our first question tonight, which is from Mark Corden.
What is it about you and your party that attracts racists and extremists, whether you say you want them or not?
Well, I've done more.
Yes, I gets a rather large round of applause and absolutely no boos whatsoever from what I could say. Given that Reform are currently polling, depending what poll you cite, anywhere between 16% and 24%, I would be expecting somewhere in the region of about a fifth of that audience to boo at the very least, but all we got was claps. Anyway, with that point firmly made, and I'm definitely going to be saying it again, if you actually Google Mark Corden, you can quite clearly see that he has his own website and is a filmmaker, or a cameraman, I guess, as some people have been saying. And he's been working in TV and film drama for over 25 years, and has worked as an assistant director on HGTV and features, and is also a writer and director of several award-winning short films. But we go even further down on this page. You have, I guess, what we can say, some of his greatest hits sourced from IMDb, and some of these are clearly BBC works. Doctor Who is the obviously biggest one, and also just underneath it, Doctors, again, another BBC production. And so this is why people are saying, oh, clearly these were BBC plants. Because you have someone working for the BBC being put into the audience, and he's been given the first question to ask, and it's basically, why are you racist and evil? Which is, for lack of any better term, just an excuse to have 2 minutes of hate. It's not insightful, you don't actually care about the answer, you just want to have the opportunity to ask Nigel Farage to his face why he is evil, to just let him know that you think he's evil. If this is the quality of the first questions for who is a serious leader and possible leader of the opposition, I think it's very unlikely, but it is possible. And this is the first thing that the BBC has decided, yes, that's what we need to ask, as if it is a serious broadcaster, and as if that in any way is being impartial. But don't worry, it gets worse. So after a back and forth about Nigel Farage having actually kicked out people from the party who have said openly racist and despicable things, this is layered on really heavily by Fiona Bruce, who, from what I can tell in the clips of Question Time that she is on, she is a pretty good host. The problem is that she will have a whole team of producers and directors in the background that have effectively said she needs to move on to a question like this.
You've very clearly wanted to distance yourself from this man, Andrew Parker. We've all heard that.
Anyone.
Anyone. Let's talk about some of your candidates.
What I find frustrating about this line of questioning is that it is all we have had in the news for a few weeks now about, Reform brought in a vetting company that either Reform themselves or the vetting company themselves, it doesn't really matter which, didn't vet their candidates properly, which of course they didn't. This election kind of came out of nowhere for a lot of people, but especially Reform, who didn't think that Rishi Sunak was going to commit electoral suicide over and over again over the past 4 weeks. So obviously they've had to rush to find what? Well, not quite 600 people, but 500 odd people to stand as candidates in all of these constituencies all over Great Britain, because they're not standing any in Northern Ireland. So of course there are going to be spicy people. When you're outside of the mainstream, there are spicy people. Of course, the Tories also have their fair share of spicy people, and they get attacked for that as well, but I just find it so boring at this point. There was no way the first question needed to be dedicated to this, and there was no way Fiona Bruce needed to layer it on top. By the way, she goes in to actually quote what these people said.
That is reported as having been said by them is not the kind of language I would ever use. But also, we know what we're talking about.
I find it so odd that that's how Fiona Bruce decided to go with this line of questioning, to go to the audience and say, you know what I mean, he's racist and evil. That's how it comes across. And I can understand why Nigel Farage and a load of other reform activists are never going to want to go near the BBC again. Because you're supposed to be the pinnacle of journalism. You are the state broadcaster. And an awful lot of time is being spent saying, Nigel Farage, why do you think you attract racists? I don't know. You can ask that about all parties. They all have their fair share of skeletons in the closet, apart from maybe the Liberal Democrats, but that's because they're frightfully boring. But it is never layered on as much as it is with Nigel Farage. And as I say, she goes on to quote these people.
So Leslie Lilly, candidate for Southend, Eastern Rochford, who said of migrants on small boats, more scum entering the UK, I hope your family get robbed, beaten or attacked.
And she goes on and on and on and on. But already, Nigel Farage has said appalling, I don't agree with it, she's been kicked out. Why do you need to go on? Why do you need to go on? Because this is nothing but 2 minutes of hate. That is why. And the next question is absolutely no better whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I know some of my friends, they have start-up companies, but none of them employ a whole slew of massive racists like you. So
I mean, that may as well be the same question again. That is literally the exact same. It's not even really a question, it's more just a statement. He was more open to this attack than the cameraman who disguised it as a question. This was just, you associate with racists, and that was it. And according to Unmasked Antifa, this guy's a activist for refugees, and I think has even represented people legally as asylum seekers and refugees. He's clearly an activist lawyer. I don't mind activists being in the question time audience, but if you're going to have activists that are clearly very left-wing there, I'd expect some right-wing ones, but I guess we'll see if we will see any.
I credited you with more intelligence than to say it's an actor. And what I want, I'm not an actor myself, but I want to defend actors. Not all actors are racist, but, you know, probably the only actors who are racist are the actors in your party, the Reform Party.
Again, this is just the same thing. This isn't adding on to anything. This is talking about the story of the person who said quite openly racist slurs on camera to Channel 4, and it turned out he was an actor. We don't know if he was hired by Channel 4. I don't think that's true. We do know that he was actually putting on one of his acting persona voices when he was saying that, which is very, very strange. But basically what this comes down to is that Channel 4 don't look good whichever way you look at it. Because the guy wasn't even a candidate. The guy was a volunteer canvasser. Reform obviously... if they're not vetting their candidates properly, they're not going to vet their volunteers properly. But even then, they don't typically, no party typically vets their volunteers, because all they're doing is going out there and handing out leaflets typically. But even then, this is the sort of thing Channel 4 should be trying to investigate. Instead, they just went out and said, oh, this guy said horrific things. And now everyone on the right wing's pointing out, hang on, he's an actor. Hang on, a lot of this story doesn't pass the sniff test. And anyway, he's a volunteer canvasser anyway. Hardly anything that we're actually in control of. But unfortunately, it is a story that stuck. So Channel 4 News have succeeded. Amazing.
I just want to know, when are you actually going to take responsibility of your actions and say sorry and stop making excuses?
I'm not going to apologise.
We are 3 separate people in, and every single one of them has asked the same thing, or effectively done the same thing, I should say. Either disguised as a question, or in the case of the second guy, not disguised as a question, just to say, you're racist, I want you to bow down to my moral worldview. And Farage is right not to apologise, because this is obviously a bunch of people that they don't really want an apology. They just want Farage gone, effectively. Obviously, they can't kill him, and I'm not necessarily saying they want to kill him, but they want him out of public life. And even if he gave an apology, there would be absolutely no benefit to it. They are not going to say, okay, he's apologised, that's good. They're just going to keep berating him until he's out of the public realm. Luckily, Farage actually has a backbone, so he carries on.
I just have a question about being a paid actor.
4 people! That is 4 people asking the same question. I'm not shocked he doesn't want to go back to the BBC. How the hell have they found 4 people who just want to ask the same question? And when they get an answer, they just repeat the question. This is why the NPC meme has stuck so well. How else can I describe this behaviour?
You also run you are online on a website called Cameo, where you'll record paid shorts of you doing roasts or pep talks for people. I was just wondering, your cheapest ones you do are £70. If I paid you £70 now, would you admit that this country would be nothing without our rich history of immigration?
Do you see what I mean? These are not serious questions. They're not at all. They are dressed up ways of saying, I hate you, you're racist. It's 4 in a row. 4 in a row. And you got to realise, the Question Time directors and producers, they know these questions in advance. And they give the script to Fiona Bruce, obviously. Again, I don't blame her too much for this. But they know that they're going to get these 4 questions in a row. They know it. They have given Fiona Bruce the script to say, right, ask this person, then ask this person, then ask this person. 4 times in a row, they just said, right, just get the people that are going to call him racist. This is only interesting to people in Islington. To the London Westminster dinner parties that Liz Truss was talking about that she doesn't get invited to. It's because they don't have anything of interest to actually say. They're effectively the monkey dust dinner party sketches. And if you've not seen those sketches, I implore you, they're on YouTube. Just have a look and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The most pretentious people alive on the planet, who care about nothing else in this world other than status seeking. Hence they turn into NPCs.
Just listen to you talk about how the establishment are against you and how everything's a conspiracy theory. Why can't you accept that it's your violent racist rhetoric that's causing this?
5! That's 5 in a row! That is 5 questions in a row. Not even questions, sorry, they're not all questions. 5 different ways of effectively saying, you're racist, I hate you. Why would he go on the BBC again? There is far much more to talk about in the Reform Manifesto. There's not even racism in the manifesto, to be quite frank with you. I went through the whole damn thing. I went through the whole thing twice, in fact, once for a stream and a second time to react to an idiot leftist who was saying it's full of conspiracy theories and then agreed with 60% of it. Immigration comes down, 1 in, 1 out. That's still close to 500,000 net immigrants a year, but obviously 90-odd% of the immigrants are foreign-born as well, so it's actually not too bad of a difference, and it's certainly an improvement. However, my God, there has to be some improvement in the public perception of how we should talk about politics, because this is frankly very embarrassing.
Within the last 2 years, my wife is a non-UK national from Nepal. She came to the UK within the last 2 years. Are you saying people like her are not welcome anymore?
6 in a row.
Your core pledge concerning illegal migration.
Okay, this is 7 in a row about migration. I am praying that there's actually something of substance here. I hope this isn't just, oh, you're racist for not letting the people come over from France, you know, that unsafe, war-torn country.
States that migrants in small boats could be returned to France. How will you achieve this?
Yep, good. Excellent. It only took 7 people, but we finally got someone who is actually asking about policy. I'm not putting the answers here, obviously, because of copyright reasons. However, if you want to know the answer, go to the BBC and find out. Or if you don't have a TV licence, hopefully there's a clip somewhere on Twitter. But 7 questions and we finally get someone asking, how are you going to actually send them back? And no doubt, he will have had some sort of plan. How realistic or not it is, I have no idea. Please, go and find out yourself if you're interested.
An answer to your question, do you feel?
Not exactly. No, I've just got this vision of like the D-Day landings in reverse when we're sort of offloading all these poor people onto the sands of Omar Beach.
I don't know what Nigel Farage's answer to the question was, but that might be a perfectly fair and valid criticism. Point is, this was not a question to just say, Nigel Farage, I hate you and you're racist. She genuinely seemed curious about the question and answer. So this is fine. Well done. Took 7 people, but we got there.
You had to flee persecution from the UK.
I mean, before he continues, Yeah, Nigel Farage actually nearly did leave the country because of the Coots banking thing. He got debanked and felt politically persecuted, and he was genuinely considering leaving the country, so I'm interested to see where this goes.
And seek asylum in a different country, how would you like to be treated?
I imagine largely the same as he's going to be treating asylum seekers when he's in power. If there is legitimate reason and they've come through the safe and legal routes, then they can have some help to stay here until the persecution is over, and then they can be sent back. In terms of hostility of this question, though, that's not an awful one. It's a very much more polite way of saying, I think you're racist, though. That is definitely the undertone of that question. But as I keep saying, there's way more to reform than just the immigration question. However, again, because most people are NPCs, all they will see is, and Farage has played into this as well, that this is the immigration election. Therefore, obviously there's going to be a lot of questions on it, but I don't know how many different ways they can basically ask the same thing, which is effectively just to say, you're racist and I hate you. There's not... The only question so far I'd say that has been serious about getting a policy answer was the woman who asked, how are you going to send them back to France? That, as far as I'm concerned, is the only fair question so far. The rest have either been direct character attacks or slimy, underhanded, I know that your character's really bad, and I'm going to try and corner you with my question, which, again, I have no idea how he answered it, but these questions are either slimy at best or outright hostile at worst.
A lot of the language you use about political smear campaigns and the biggest rallies is quite reminiscent to me of Trump in America.
Well, okay, yeah, there's similarities there. You're present currently in an audience where 6 people in a row basically said you're racist and I hate you without actually really asking a question. I mean, I understand why you wouldn't notice that necessarily, but it's amazing he's part of that audience, and then at the same time trying to say, yeah, but this is all a conspiracy theory, isn't it? I mean, I suppose he would say that. He's technically part of the conspiracy.
Would you say that you're like-minded characters?
I mean, that was another one that wasn't exactly a you're racist and I hate you direct question. It was another slimy, underhanded, I'm cornering you and character attacking you. I'm fed up of having questions like that, to be quite honest with you. And character attacks are always going to be present in politics. I don't mind questions like that, particularly. If it was just one question, not right at the start, somewhere in the middle, I would not be making this video. But as I say, we've had, what, 8, 9 questions so far? Something like that? And as I say, only one of them has not been hostile in some way. It's nuts.
Evening. So you claim that Brexit will help Britain prosper. Why hasn't it?
Okay, that's now 2 questions that haven't been openly hostile or slimy. That is a direct question. That is asking about policy. That is getting his perspective on why Brexit has effectively not been the success story that was necessarily promised by Farage, who, by the way, wasn't in government. Perfectly valid question, perfectly fine.
I voted to leave. I'm unhappy. I understand Nigel's not the Prime Minister, but, I mean, on the ground level, for the common working man and woman, nothing's changed.
This guy, it's fairly hard to work out necessarily, but he is probably at least considering voting reform. Again, this has taken 10 questions to get to, but we've kind of finally got to someone who's actually fair and actually genuinely asking about policy. Again, I'm not entirely necessarily convinced the woman before was trying to be fair with her answer about Farage's answer, but again, I don't know full context there, so I might be being a bit harsh. But yeah, we do finally get to someone interesting, and I don't know exactly how long it took in terms of time, but it took 10 questions to get to. And no doubt this is probably going to be the only time we even remotely get a question like this. So 10% of the time so far we've had a decent question, possibly 20 if I'm being generous. It's not exactly good, a good result from the BBC, I'd say.
I'm a Labour voter, but I voted for Brexit, and I thought things would possibly change, as did many people. But on the ground level, if you look at what's happening at the moment in the country, there's a lot of poverty.
Yeah, this is for lack of a better term, a thinking man. Genuinely seems like the type of person who's genuinely thinking about his vote. We need more people like that in these audiences because, I'll be honest with you, that's probably the biggest cohort of the electorate so far. People who are either spoiling or not going to vote. But as I say, there doesn't seem to be anyone here who is actually a reform voter at the moment. Which again, if that's, 15 to 20% of the country, how have you managed to get through 10 questions and not had a single one from a reform voter? that appears to be the worst part of this.
I'm a doctor in the NHS. My parents and myself were migrants to this country. You've said that the reason that there's waiting lists for the NHS is because of migrants.
Okay, this is fine so far. My initial instinct is that this isn't going to end up as a particularly good question.
But since Brexit, there's been shortages of critical medications in the NHS, from what I understand, because of supply chain issues.
All right, I'm still not sure where this question's going.
As someone that we have to thank for Brexit, what would you propose that we should do about this?
All right, questions about the NHS and was perfectly fine. There's been supply chain issues, there's been crisis with the NHS. I don't know why she brought up that she's a migrant along with her parents. I guess it was again to slyly say, I hate you, and that actually there are good immigrants, as if Nigel Farage didn't marry a German. There's so little willingness to understand the actual argument from the anti-immigration side that I can see why people like Farage, who have been on that side in public for decades at this point, would just get fed up with it. Why would I keep coming on these shows where you're just not getting it? How many times do I need to explain it?
There's not enough of certain types of medications.
In terms of medication...
Is because too many people are using them. Is that what you're saying?
The reason we have a waiting list...
No, she's asking us...
The reason you can't get a GP...
She's asking us...
I'm not being funny, but part of that waiting list is down to the lack of drug supply. And Nigel Farage is just taking this question and applying it to the NHS as a whole rather than just specifically as because of the lack of medicine, due in part, yes, to supply chain issues. I mean, on the one hand, I can understand why Fiona Bruce is saying no, just stick to the medicine question. On the other hand, I can completely understand why Nigel Farage is doing a more high-level explanation of the issue with the NHS and migration. But overall, with this question, I think it's fine. I don't think I'm going to put this in the category of explicitly hostile, so well done. That is now 3 decent questions out of 12. And still, not a single Reform voter has asked a question. If we're going to be pedantic with proportions so far, they should have asked 2 or 3.
How much better off are you because of the taxes you don't have to pay through the UK leaving the European Union?
Well, I suppose we're getting a bit more interesting with the I hate you questions. This is now, I hate you and you're rich. I mean, again, this is the level of political discourse. What's that, 13 questions? 3 have been alright. There's only one where I've really gone, to be fair, that's a pretty good question, by the Labour voter who voted leave. That's the only question where I've really gone, yeah, that's a really good question, actually. The other 2 ones that were not hostile, they were fine questions. Don't have a problem with them, but I think they should be the lowest quality questions we encounter in question time. Instead, so far, we've had 10 others that are just, as I say, either slimy ways of saying I hate you, or explicit ways of saying I hate you. I mean, if we're going to character attack people, can we at least make it smart and actually make it witty, rather than just how much richer are you and why do you attract all these horrible people I hate?
We heard from the Green Party before you, and to me they felt full of hope. Listening to you, it feels full of fear.
I find it quite incredible. They found a Green voter to ask questions at this question time event, but not a Reform voter. And again, what is it? It's a question of, I hate you. It's just dressed up, I hate you.
How do you plan to pay for it? There's a lot of stuff in your manifesto, but how do you actually plan to pay for all this stuff?
I hate the media so goddamn much. So this is in reference to this idiot Sky News chart that tries to imply, oh, the Greens and Reform are both absolutely mental when it comes down to spending. When it comes to everyone else, they're actually being very sensible and centrist. They actually tried to go down this route. I did a video the other week where I actually do these calculations myself. This is the bar chart that I ended up with. I want to make it clear the Labour calculation was slightly wrong due to me getting slightly confused with their calculations. They are not in a deficit, they are actually in a slight surplus by about £500,000 or something like that. Tories are at about 700,000. Greens are just open about having to borrow 60 to 70 billion pounds a year, and Reform managed to get an average of about £9 billion surplus per year. This is just a total sleight of hand when it comes to statistics from Sky News. And as I say, once again, I'm really glad I did that video because this graph actually came up more than I thought it would. I don't know why I didn't think it would be being brought up this much, but again, it's a completely coordinated attack from all different fronts. It's not just the BBC, it's most of the news organisations, apart from maybe GB News. He doesn't even necessarily go on to effectively have his back patted by them. They still give him questions about policy that aren't necessarily easy to answer. Yet we literally just have fake news pushed forward by everyone because what? It came from Sky News? Well, here's my evidence that they are complete and utter liars. How are you going to pay for it all? Read the manifesto. It's all in there. Hopefully that's what Nigel said.
You're just going to leave all the HS2 that's already been built, that's all just going to be scrapped, all the construction
Well,
yards everywhere,
very often in life, the first cut's the best cut.
I mean, I suppose to be fair to this guy, this isn't... This is hostility that I don't exactly blame him for, I'll say. From the information that he has obviously gathered, this isn't an unfair question necessarily. Yes, they do have a lot of spending pledges. However, obviously he has completely ignored the savings that Reform are putting forward, saying that they'll make. And I mean, even then, when he says, oh, HS2 is going to go down the drain, I mean, I've cut out the last clip because it doesn't really matter. But Nigel basically says, well, we're not going to put more money into it because it's now just a waste of money. Because costs have skyrocketed, they've skyrocketed because of ridiculous planning laws that have meant that we need to put this train under something like 40 miles of tunnel or something like that, when trains in the British countryside are not exactly something that we're not used to seeing. But obviously this is just sunk cost fallacy, and Farage is pushing back on it. And as I say, he's clearly answered the question properly, and again, from the information that this guy has, it's not really an unfair question, so I'm not going to put it in the hostile area of it. So that's what, 15 questions, 4 weren't awful, 1 of them was actually quite good. Yeah, that's pretty bad from the BBC. So bad that I don't particularly blame Nigel for refusing to go on BBC again until he gets an apology. Because, as I say, you can't have 15 questions, only have 4 of them be any good, and literally have the other 11 effectively just be borderline abuse. And I want to make it clear, I have no issue with character attacks when it comes to any sort of politics. They're everywhere. Everyone makes them. It's a hallmark of political debate. You are always going to have character attacks within it. However, I've been recently reading about Benjamin Disraeli and William Gladstone, and I'm not quite to the part where they are direct rivals yet, but there is plenty of recorded evidence, obviously, of them being in Parliament making character attacks. Just to make the point, this was a speech that Disraeli made in response to Sir Charles Wood after Disraeli became Chancellor of the Exchequer, who was preceded by Charles Wood. Earlier in the debate, Wood had called the Chancellor reckless on income taxation, forgetting his own proposal to double the tax. Talk of recklessness, Disraeli mocked, but then the right honourable gentleman tells me in not very polished and scarcely in parliamentary language that I do not know my business. There were some other things Wood also needed to learn. Disraeli continued, notably, that scurrility is not sarcasm, and that insolence is not invective. Just to translate that for you, effectively Disraeli is calling Sir Charles Wood a slimy liar there, in very witty language. And that is just simply what we don't see anymore. You compare that to any type of insult that comes from, say, Jess Phillips or, say, Angela Rayner, and it's just not on the same level at all. And I do understand that these are members of the public, but standards have just clearly completely dropped from the Victorian period, and I suppose you could say, well, it's quite unfair. You're comparing parliamentarians of the Victorian period to standard, normal people of the 21st century, and I'd say, no, we have 200 years extra experience on them, and somehow we've rolled backwards. Anyway, according to Farage, there was no apology from the Rig Question Time audience that has been forthcoming, so instead he's appearing on Sky News and GB News this morning instead, to which people are saying, oh, he doesn't like scrutiny. If he doesn't like scrutiny, there's no way you'd go to Sky News, because I'd argue they're worse than the BBC. Anyway, with that, I think what I am going to say is Farage is probably going to do quite well at this election. He will probably gather anywhere between 15 to 25% of the vote. I nearly went to 20, but I just get the feeling they'll do slightly better than that. Probably only out of that actually win double-digit seats if he's lucky, more than likely single-digit seats. But much like around the Brexit referendum, he will be everywhere. He will be campaigning like mad, especially if he gets a seat in Parliament. And I imagine the people of Clacton would like that, because the biggest 2 fingers you can give to Parliament, and the Westminster bubble in general, is Nigel Farage. And I imagine when it comes to 2029, he will have made plenty of arguments, not only in Parliament, but to the media at large as well. and his message will become clearer and clearer and clearer while problems get worse and worse and worse under Labour. And you never know, you'll either see Nigel Farage as Prime Minister in 2029 or his successor. That is, of course, assuming that the Tories' reaction is to go even further left rather than do what everyone has been begging them to do for years and go further right. Anyway, that's everything I had for you today. So, quite a few streams actually this week. So, tomorrow it's Tosh. We're talking about what we reckon will happen over the next 5 years over Labour. Wednesday it's Regional Variations with Tailed Feature, where we will have the relaxing part of the week. And then Thursday from 9 PM, I will be doing an election stream where we will be hopefully not getting too blackpilled while waiting for the results to come in. I believe that crime guy has even set up a bit of a quiz for us, so you can join us in on that. Anyway, after that, my channel will obviously still be covering politics as and when, but I will be spreading out once again to talk about media, other parts of culture and things like that. Not just talking about politics, which I've been doing for the past 6 weeks for obvious reasons. We also will be doing a charity stream on my girlfriend's channel, Tash's channel. We'll be putting all the information out for that in due course. On Friday the 12th of July, where we'll be getting together for a 2 to 3 hour stream probably, going through a load of animal stories like we do on Regional Variations to raise money for animal charities. Again, all information will be put out in due course. Join us on the Discord down below to keep up to date with that, and, well, hopefully I'll see you at all those streams. But for now, that is everything I had for you today, so once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.